those pilots who are just kind of along for the ride yet.
How would you describe the difference between regional and major, if there is any? What hit you in the face when you reached the majors? What was different, or nothing?
Okay, so my experience would be a little bit different than some because I went from flying regionals in the post September 11th era to a major carrier in another country.
So your first major was in China.
That's right. Well, not China, but yeah, China.
Somewhere out there.
Taiwan. Depends on who you ask, but at the time it was called Taiwan Republic of China, and now people are trying to call it other things depending on their political views. But if you ask them, it's still Taiwan.
So your first captain experience was at an airline where the culture was you're the only one who has permission to think.
At a major, yes. Not only, permission to think, the ability to think. And by the way, you don't really have that much leeway, so don't mess it up. And by the way, don't think too hard.
Were you hired as a captain in the abroad airline?
Yeah, I was, as a matter of fact. Direct entry. I was hired as a direct entry Boeing captain, having never flown a Boeing before, by the way.
Dude.
But as you said, you get hired for your captain skills.
Right, and you were a captain here at a regional.
If you're going to get hired to be a captain. Here, you get hired to be a first officer. You generally get hired at your first officer skills and develop the skills on the job to become a captain.
When you came back to the States and got on with the other airlines, you went from captain to FO to the right seat.
I did. It was a little bit painful.
It was painful, so I'm assuming it was a tough adjustment.
It was. It was and it wasn't. It mostly was because it is not nice to be a guest where you were once the master, but if you take your ego out of it, you can pick up some extra skills. And so I used the opportunity the best I could to pick up those extra skills. There are some things you lose as a captain, and they're technical generally because you're not the technical guy, you're the decision guy.
Right.
So that's where you're the sharpest. And so if I had a chance to go back and fly on the right, or fly the first officer side of things, I bring a lot to the table, especially to a place where the captains could use some experience. And not for nothing, I came back here and it was like a cakewalk. Absolute cakewalk, because it was trial by fire in Taiwan, I'll tell you that much.
Wow. So that made you a better pilot in many ways.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And I mean, if I were going to quantify it with a grade, when I left SkyWest, I was pretty good at being a SkyWest pilot, and I thought I was like A-grade pilot maybe, because I'm a pilot. And when I
thought I was the best because I'm a pilot.
Exactly. How true is it, though, isn't it? So I thought I was the best, at least good enough to be among the best.
The only reason I thought I was good was because I was a pilot. If I were any other profession, I wouldn't think I was.
Probably thought I was pretty average. But since I was a pretty average SkyWest captain, I think I'm basically 2 steps down from His Highness. And I thought, well, I'm pretty good at this. And I got hired based on my presentation to that airline in Taiwan.
All right.
They were happy to have me. In fact, they called me up and said, we'd love to have you, which was not something I was expecting because I didn't think I had the experience they required. I'd never flown abroad.
It was a 737.
I'd never flown a Boeing.
Right.
Yeah, and 737 is a complicated dinosaur compared to an E175, which is essentially fully automated when you want it to be. It was a step down in tech, like 7 steps down in technology. It was way down there.
Wow.
So it required a lot more attention and different kinds of attention and different kinds of situational awareness. And with a first officer who had 200 hours, I was, are you kidding me over here?
Legit. They put you with a 200-hour.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah. First-year guys have, anywhere between 190 hours plus maybe 50, 100 hours in the sim.
So when you flight train in a typical flight training area here in the States, and you hear these Chinese international students on the radio,
after they get their commercial multi,
they join you in the 737
or 747 or a 777 or an A330.
Whoa.
Or an A320, whatever they have.
What's the upgrade?
Unless they didn't do well, and then they get the like Mandarin Airlines instead of China Airlines, and they fly like a 170 or fly a Q400 or something.
What's the average upgrade time there?
7 years maybe.
Okay, so at least you have 7 years of airplane time before now you're the one who has permission to make decisions.
Yeah, they need a certain number of landings. They need a certain number of hours. They need a certain number of, like, a lot of things. But it's not, it sounds like a reasonable system on paper, but actually it's terrible because they're only allowed, not only are they not allowed to make decisions or even participate, they don't participate, which means they can't really grow the skill. So they go from kind of watching the skill on the side
Do they land?
Sometimes.
So it's not 1-1 like here in the States?
Nope.
So it's the captain's decision to be nice and say, hey, you could land.
In fact, they don't see it that way. They see it as if the captain believes that the first officer can do it and it is wise, then he will give the first officer a landing, an attempt at a landing.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's generally presumed that the first officer can't do it. Whatever the thing is, the first officer can't do it.
Dude, that sucks.
So if you're feeling like it, not like a nice guy, because it's not necessarily a nice guy thing to let the guy land.
Right.
It's everything you know about interaction between two people, or just ball it up and throw it in the bin. Because our culture is very different. Western culture and Eastern culture are very different. Here's a perfect example. Tell me. I'm going to name 3 things, and you're going to say what's alike, okay? Monkey, bear, banana.
What do you mean name what's it like?
Take two of those things and make them a pair for me.
Oh, monkey and banana.
Monkey and banana. All right. Now, how about glove, scarf, hand?
Glove in hand.
Okay. Easy. That's Western culture. Your hand uses the glove.
Right.
Okay. The monkey eats banana. Everybody I ask in Taiwan the same question is going to say the opposite.
No.
They're going to say monkey and bear. They're going to say glove and scarf.
So it's just completely different culture.
It's categorical thinking as opposed to the individualistic thinking.
Wow.
It's just a very different thing, and they're not dumb or something, and we're not dumb. I mean, we're dumb and they're dumb, but that has nothing to do with whether we think categorically or individualistically.
Right.
Collectively versus individualistically. Not like a psychologist of some kind, but the point is, they think differently. And this is their system.
Different culture, yeah.
Exactly. So what you think you know about interaction between two people, believe me, if you go in there with that mindset, you're going to be hurt.
So that experience, getting hired direct captain, just being in the cockpit with just that culture close by, how many years were you doing that for?
I did a 3-year contract there.
3 years. That must have taught you a lot about communicating with people who aren't like you.
Oh, boy. So like I said, I thought I was an A-grade pilot when I left SkyWest, and I found out very quickly I was about a C- pilot overall.
With flying or with being a captain?
All the skills required of being an airline guy or a professional in general. I could fly the plane. In fact, I got to the 737, and I could fly it within about an hour. I was actually pretty good at it. I could probably fly any plane inside of about an hour, and so could any professional pilot. Anyone who's got like 4 or 5 type ratings says, just tell me the speeds, and that's it. and show me where the speed tape is, or show me where the altimeter is, and just tell me the speeds.
Would you? Yeah.
That's it. Not even the altimeter. No one cares. It's like, just tell me the speeds.
Yeah.
So I know how it flies, and I know what number to hit. And look, you want a jet to descend? Put the nose on the horizon, pull the power to idle, pitch for 250. You will descend.
That's it.
Yeah, you want to stay level? Put the nose at 3 degrees, keep it about 260 knots indicated. You'll be good.
That's it.
I mean, there's just things that you pick up along the way about a swept wing jet. And depending on the sweep, you're like, oh, this airplane swept back more. It's going to need more of this or this kind of thing during approach. You figure it out. The technical things. You really get on with a different type. It's just another type. So when I got to the 737, my situational awareness was really good. In general, I was really sharp in terms of piloting skills because we're flying around in the Midwest in a regional. You get a lot of repetitions in really crazy weather, and it's as crazy there as almost anywhere. I mean, even in the Pacific, I'm flying around in typhoons, and it's pretty much just like a cold front in the Midwest.
Right.
It gets pretty hectic and a little bit dicey sometimes in Cincinnati also. Wind shear off the cliffs, stuff like that. Now, the other skills I needed there about being a pilot that I didn't develop here, partially because of my base, like terrain, for example. I didn't have a lot of experience with nearby terrain, but something they do in Japan, particularly Japan and the Philippines, is a lot of circling approaches in IMC. So
IMC,
yeah, you still have visual minimums, but you begin your circling approach and you start. I mean, you're pretty much in IMC, instrument meteorological conditions.
Whoa.
As you start. Like, you see the runway, you're not supposed to lose it, but you're not going to be really all the visibility and stuff like that you'd think on a nice clear day.
So do they do circling approaches because the system does not have the money to put instrument approaches on all runways?
You can't make a straight-in approach to a lot of those runways because there's a mountain on the other side.
I gotcha. It's terrain.
There's a mountain on two sides, as a matter of fact. So
it's terrain.
Yeah, you're in a bowl or whatever, and there's no straight-in approach available to that side.
Got it.
So in Japan, you get to a place, I think it was Takamatsu, and you're either doing a straight-in, which is offset. Sorry, straight in.
Right.
With air quotes if you're not watching. Or you're doing a circle to land on 2.6 with a lot of mountains. And boy, you're pointing straight at them when you turn base as well. So you really have to trust.
In a 737.
In a 737, you can barely see. The only thing you can see is the runway.
Whoa.
Good luck. Yeah, and that's something I didn't have. We don't do circling approaches.
Right.
In fact, when you get your ATP, when you get a type rating here in this country, because on our type ride, I don't know what FAA individual decided to stamp his authority over this, but we don't check circling approaches because we don't do circling approaches in IMC. So in fact, all of our ATP certificates have a limitation on them. When you get typed in an ERJ or CRJ or whatever, it'll say VMC circle to land only in the limitations section.
Interesting.
Because you're never going to do one.
Right.
You're not authorized to do one.
Right.
Why would you do one?
Right.
It's bad juju, they say.
Huh.
So anyway, but we do them daily at China Airlines. Whether the weather's good or bad, it's like where does the wind favor? And the runway's short, so you don't just get to take a tailwind landing.
So it's altogether a completely different animal of flying.
Oh, it's the Wild West, too, when you get to places without air traffic control or under-skilled ATC. And their philosophy of ATC is not ATC. Here we talk about air traffic control. But internationally speaking, that is an incorrect presumption. It is air traffic out of control. They're there as a service. It is air traffic service under ICAO standards and Doc 4444 and all these numbered documents in the ICAO chapters or annex through 18 or 19, whatever they're up to now. They all refer to air traffic service because they don't all perform the same services.
Right.
Separation, sometimes. Sometimes it's just a relay. Be flying around the Philippines and you have Manila control when you're over the island. That's a radar service.
Right.
But you also have Manila radio, who are relaying your requests.
So are you saying that air traffic control service, if the only place you've ever flown is America, it's one of those you don't know how good you have it?
You'd have any idea. In fact, if you're based at O'Hare or Atlanta, I'm telling you what, you think it's busy or hectic in there, but they're holding your hand the whole way in. They have their eye on you.
They know exactly what they're doing.
Within a second of your position.
Huh.
They are so switched on. But you'd be out there in like whatever Jiao, not necessarily Guangzhou or Hangzhou or something like this, or Nanjing or Ningbo, like any of these cities that you basically
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Nanjing. That's your captain speaking.
It's Nanjing. Yeah. 各位旅客，这是你们的机长广播。
Now you sound like the flight attendant.
Right? They trained me, what can I say? For my cockpit announcements in Mandarin. But you don't know. You also don't. Look, if you tell air traffic service that you want to turn base, they approve you because they assume you can do it. Yeah. Otherwise, you would not have asked.
Dude.
So if you kind of drop below the MSA and you're below the minimum vectoring altitude, but you made a request, they might clear you for it. They might because you asked. And when they issue a clearance, it is a traffic clearance, like no observed traffic.
Whoa.
So your clearance is a base leg, and you requested it, so you're approved as requested because you are clear of traffic. But that doesn't mean you're not going to hit the mountain or overshoot or do something really stupid. You could be doing 250 knots trying to turn base leg, and guess what? You're going to overshoot. But they think you got it because you asked, and you're the pilot in command.
Right.
So why wouldn't they? They're a service. They're here to provide that service for you.
Is the relationship between pilots and flight attendants any different here or there?
Oh, yes.
How?
First of all, the captain in Asia is several grades above any authority there is.
He's straight up God.
Essentially. He might as well be because they're atheists, so he might as well be God. They're not all, of course. There's all kinds of religions out there, but generally speaking, yeah, you could say the captain is God. It's like Mike Ditka or the captain. Who wins?
So he's like I see where you're getting at. The captain is it.
The captain is it, and everyone else seniority based. So you would think that the pilots have say over some things, whether the pilot, whichever pilot is saying something, but it won't be true. It'll be the captain, and then the senior most flight attendant, who's the purser, who's probably been there the longest, who's the oldest, because age before. The rules in Asia, as I know them, or at least in Taiwan where I was living and at the airline where I was working, the rules are as follows. The oldest guy in the room is right. That is number 1. Number 2, save face. Number 3.
What's save face?
Number 3 is everything else. Please reference rules 1 and 2. So rule number 1, the oldest guy in the room is right. That is pretty self-explanatory, right? All right. So rule number 2, save face. Let's go to a situation, a non-aviation situation. I'm at a 16-lane interchange of regular city streets in Taipei. Red lights, and some guy just goes. Everyone, cross traffic is going, but this guy, perpendicular, just shoots out. People are slamming the horns, slamming the brakes. This car's going to get crushed. And I'm like, this guy surely saw, but he went anyway. Why? Well, he's the oldest guy in the room. And when everyone saw that he was old when they got up to him, that's when they slammed the brakes. Not when they're about to hit the car, when they saw that he was the old guy. So then, because they were wrong, because they were honking the horn at the old guy, they would just start to wave. Instead of giving him the finger like they were gonna, he's the old guy, so now they're going to wave. Oh, hi, I was just saying hi.
So that's the culture.
That's saving face. Yeah. That's letting everyone not be embarrassed, which is actually kind of a good thing. But maybe not the best priority in aviation.
Not the safest thing.
Not the safest of priorities. It's maybe a great thing. And we have a lot to learn from respecting our elders, in terms of Eastern culture. They don't do everything wrong. And I hope I didn't give anyone the impression that I believe that. They do a lot of things really right.
It's just different.
It's one of the in fact, in terms of safety in general, like in terms of public safety, Asia is where it's at. I mean, if you want to walk down the street in the middle of the night wearing your headphones in Venice, good luck to you. But if you do it anywhere in Asia, no matter how big the city, you know what? Good on you. And if you drop your keys, someone will, instead of following you back to your house and opening them,
pick it up.
You'll pick it up and give them to you. Your wallet, your phone, whatever.
Yeah.
It's a safe place out there. But in terms of aviation, it's probably not the right priority list because that's ego, isn't it? And ego is there's just no room in the cockpit for an ego. Not most of the time, anyway.
Boeing cockpits are too small to fit an ego,
especially the 737. The only thing that can fit in there is an ego.
That's why they make the cockpit small compared to the Airbus, so the pilot has to leave the ego outside. What is it, Asian culture or Eastern culture? Eastern culture.
Where you draw the line, I'm not entirely sure because the East for some people starts in, say, Persia or like Baghdad or something, but... You never know when someone says Eastern, they're basically referring to non-European.
Baghdad.
Or I should say, when they say Western, they're referring to European and and North Americas. Yeah. And then everything else that is not Western culture.
Just a different animal. And to be able to fly in that gives you a whole new perspective.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it was trial by fire, as it were. I mean, that's how the metaphor goes, sink or swim. But yeah. I'll tell you what, I felt like I'd climbed Everest when I had my first hour off of IOE. Actually, even when I got through training, more or less unscathed, because not everyone, most people seem not to, actually.
Right.
So the fact that I even made it through was sort of mind-bending for me. I went from being this guy who couldn't find work for one reason or the other in the United States. I mean, I looked like I was a captain of SkyWest, and that's no small thing.
Right.
But it felt like I was getting left behind to all the preferential hires and people getting hired for whatever. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I thought my resume looked about like theirs. But I couldn't even get called for an interview. And I thought, enough of this. I used to be so far ahead of the game, and I'm so far behind it, is how I was feeling.
Right.
And I thought, well, let me go elsewhere. But when I got elsewhere, I realized I was barely passing grade. I had so much to learn. I didn't even really know what ICAO was. I mean, I knew that. I just thought it was like the European version of the FAA, but there couldn't be something further away from the truth because every country has its own airman information publication, which in the United States comes across as the FAR AIM, but every country's got one, and it's in something very complicated.
And let's talk about, we talked about this off air. So talk to that a little bit, where ICAO fits in, because like you said, every country has its own thing, and
Sure.
as a pilot, like what are you expected to know or not know?
There is no legitimate world police, period. So international law is something of a misnomer in some ways. There's no enforcing body. There are just agreements between countries and governing bodies.
There's no cop car police up there.
No, that's right. So the way it's generally organized, and this is why when you read the regulations here in the United States, they say no person shall take off or shall operate a U.S. civil registered aircraft, because that's really where they can take jurisdiction. Everything else is like, well, look, you're flying a Chinese plane.
Ooh, that's interesting.
You can kind of do what you want. So, for example, we in the United States, say, two 777s in San Francisco. One of them is going to a destination in the United States, and one of them is not. One of them is registered, let's say, to a Chinese carrier, and one of them is registered to an American carrier. One may take off, and one may not, depending on the destination weather. So if it's the American aircraft, they may not operate an aircraft to a destination whose weather is forecast to be below minimums at the time, at the ETA or whatever. Can't do it. It's against the law. Should be, right? What are you going to go to somewhere and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
There, you can. You may absolutely dispatch an aircraft. So they might, in fact, you can send them both to the same place, but the U.S. aircraft may not be allowed to take off because at the time of your destination is forecast to be below minimums. Whereas the China registered plane has no such restriction. Go ahead. Actually affects your operation, but it's not like the police are going to come out and say you can't take off from San Francisco, head west, be over the ocean. What are they going to do?
Right.
It's like, you want to go? Go ahead.
Right.
That's not our business. It's only our business if you are registered in the United States. We have responsibility, therefore we also have authority. But
Interesting.
If you were going to remove the responsibility from the United States, i.e. not registering the airplane here and the passengers are yours or whatever, then Godspeed, my friend.
Incredible.
Yeah, so the laws are different everywhere, and you have to be familiar with them. And so that's where ICAO comes in. It's a great, gargantuan standard list. So there's like thousands of pages, and they list everything. I mean, it's like the biggest FAR-AIM in the whole world.
So ICAO has its own book.
Más o menos. It's not exactly its own book. It's like its own volume of publications, or volumes of publications, having to do with air traffic service, having to do with flight rules, having to do with all of these things. Noise abatement. I mean, everything is covered. Everything they can think of is covered, and when they thought of something new, it gets covered. And air traffic management, air traffic services, flight operations and flight rules and things like this, airspace. All of these, technology has like 19 different implications. I mean, there's just loads of them. And the very point is that you can't know them all. You kind of have to know the ICAO standard. If you're flying in Europe, a European registered aircraft, you have to know the EASA stuff, EASA, the European Authority. And you have to know their base stuff. If you fly in the U.S., you have to U.S. based stuff. If you fly in Asia, if you fly in Japan, you spend 9 months in ground school no matter if you've got 10 shuttle landings. It doesn't matter. You spend 9 months in Japan ground school so that you can fly the Japan way by the Japan rules. The JL license is a maddening process, apparently, for those who've been through it. I haven't. It's been one of the reasons I hadn't applied to Japanese carriers.
Whoa.
Yeah, but that ticket is hard to come by. Not that you don't get paid and enjoy your life while you're doing it, but it is from scratch. All the written exams, you take your ATP all over again, you're nobody.
Whoa. So if you show up to JAL.
Yeah, it's called the JCAB license, and I was referring to Japan Airlines and their implementation and their type rating authority to conduct that training.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that.
Best case scenario is 9 months.
That's insane.
Yeah, including IOE. It's usually 12 months or longer.
Speaking of training, how long does the typical regional airline training take?
It depends on the aircraft and company, but you can. There are certain minimum standards, so you have to spend 5 or 6 or like 40 hours of basic in-dock or whatever that is, and there's some topics you have to cover, and that's, you know, something like 10 hours of information jam-packed into 40, if you know what I mean. So that could be somewhat of an intense week or somewhat not of an intense week, depending on if you've been through basic Indoc before and you kind of know the ropes and what's important to hear and what's not, or everything's important.
How many
to hear,
months?
You know, by the time you put basic Indoc together with systems training, which will probably be 2 weeks of ground school, more or less, together with simulator training, the bare minimum you're going to get out with is really 6-7 weeks.
I gotcha.
And then IOE probably a week. So, you know, from scratch, you're looking at around the 8-week mark if you're going pretty quick. Really quick would be 6. That would be really, really quick.
And the majority of time is taken up by what? Learning a new airplane?
Yes. Let's say that. Let's say the majority of the time is systems and limitations ground school, which will take you a couple weeks, and then implementing that knowledge in the simulator, which will take anywhere between 8 and 12 sessions, typically. It can take fewer. So if you're going from a 777 to a 78, or a better example is when you go from the Airbus 319, 20, 21, any of those family, to the A330, or vice versa, is a 4-day course.
It's nothing.
It's a 4-day course. It's a common type or a similar type, and they have between them what's called a star course. Boeing calls it one thing, Airbus calls it another, but it's essentially a family of type ratings, and there's a short course transition between them.